I always say my discipline knows no bounds. Perfect for Saturn entering Pisces. Welcome to my channel, Constructive Interference. I am the Mad Medicine Woman with good reason, looking for the signs, like creating order out of chaos, the subjective and objective result, the involution and evolution, the cause and effect, that nothing is a coincidence, that knowledge is power, that we can see the signs to overcome our circumstance, be the heroes of our own story, and bring into fruition the material world from the subjective mind, and get our affirmations from our manifestations and affirmations in the physical world. Knowledge is power. Studying the signs, it's not about telling the future. I don't like to hear false prophets assume their future as if they're telling someone's future. These are for signs. These are for signs as if telling the future, that we've noticed these patterns before in the past, knowing that history repeats itself. Speaking of repeating and Saturn and Pisces and having Saturn returns and our quarter returns and half returns of Saturn and what that means along our lifetime. Saturn entering Pisces may be a Saturn return at the age of 29 to 30, entering our 60s and our retirement age, even our quarter return at 15 years or a half return at 15 years, our first 15 years when we go through puberty and our maturity levels are changing. Saturn governs the physical world, our bone structure, our actual physical bodies, the organizations that run the physical world or have physical restrictions on our world, laws, regulations, that when we break a bone, bones, calcium ruled by Saturn and Capricorn, that they have major consequences when we break them. Saturn also represents the gallbladder. Huge. Saturn's been in opposition of Virgo and now entering Pisces is opposition of Virgo, the solar plexus, our gallbladder, and having discipline on the solar plexus, the gallbladder, your dairy products, gluten-free, all coming to the forefront now, especially for those experiencing their Saturn returns. They say at 30 years old, we become a little more intolerant of the cheese and dairy products. This is one reason why. And it's really difficult to have the discipline to cut those things out of our diets. Also ruled by Virgo in opposition of Saturn right now. Rules our skin and bones, the energy of structure, the god of the world, god of time. Sometimes melancholy, but imparting serenity and wisdom of the earth itself, that maturity again. And even Venus being the lower octave, you can say, of Saturn. Saturn begins the exaltation where Venus is exalted there in Libra. They have similar themes of discipline, or the need for discipline, but also harmony, justice, and these type of themes, court systems. Saturn is a realist, but never false hope. Saturn is a realist, but never false hope. A little different than Pisces, where Pisces is Jupiterian. And Saturn, they consider an esoteric original ruler of Pisces. It's where we get our religious practices and the structure of our religion. And Jupiter, Zeus, Jesus, the benefic savior, generosity, hope, expansion of our mind, higher learning, spiritual learning, real spiritual learning opposed to religious, instructed, structuredized learning, already in place, organized religion. Sometimes Jupiter can be too optimistic or naively optimistic, where it can't really get to all its plans and dreams, but is a fresh air, or always wanting to aim towards hope, expansion, making things better. Sometimes is a little exaggerated, but with the right intention. Saturn is how we control. our need for our skeleton that keeps our body together, standing tall as well. I think of the backbone, the spine, our conviction, having a tall, straight, strong backbone, metaphorically and physically. But so maybe if you have detriment to your body, or even the spinal cord and what the spine represents, can be in your birth chart along with Saturn. I have Saturn opposition of my rising in Leo, strength and fire at 2 degrees, where I lost 2 children in the fire, my war with the justice system, etc. It's all there. Dedication to structure and discipline suits business, politics, physical frames of which our buildings and bodies depend on, like the skeleton, the framing of a house, building structures, the framing and structured work of organizations. Too much control can calcify actions and attitudes, freezing the juices of creativity, which is an interesting note because the pineal gland that secretes our chrism, or Christ in Greek, can be calcified with too much fluoride, poisoning our water, which I do believe Saturn in Pisces is going to have even more toll and effect on our water, in the depletion of the quality of our water, as we've already seen in these explosions in plants around the United States alone that have affected our water. And the air quality, Pluto being in Aquarius, Pluto representing the destruction of and regeneration of, calling our attention to the quality of our air, I assume. The structure of life and its end, transcending to higher consciousness, is Saturn, again, maturing, going through tribulations, overcoming those tribulations, or not, hopefully so. Lord of harvest and death, riding the heavens by chariot, pulled by 2 snakes, like the spiraling twist of our DNA. Where problems, restrictions, and barriers are likely that we can see in our charts, like I said, putting the restrictions, or even water restrictions, or putting a limit on. There's limits and limitations, barriers, restrictions that come with Saturn. Saturn confronts us with the reality of impermanence, that things are temporary, things change, the effects of the physical world, death, temporary bodies. Similar to the Babylon god, we find Nenutra, Lord of the Earth, also can release humans from sickness and the power of demons, discipline with disciplined mind. In India, similar, Shani, God rules career, longevity, bad luck, and hardship, which Saturn does rule the 10th house, the midheaven of career. Saturn in Pisces in a birth chart, according to the books, also denotes not taking weakness or victimhood, which I believe is something that's been very projected in our Neptunian split of beliefs, our social politics of the time. The Greek called Saturn Chronos, which represents time, overthrown by Zeus after eating the first 5 children of Gaia, of the earth. Gaia had disguised Zeus as a rock, or used a rock to disguise. Gaia used a rock to disguise Zeus to fool Saturn to throw the rest of the children up. And Saturn did this in the fear that, like Saturn tried to defeat Uranus and overthrow Uranus, who fell into the water and gave birth to Venus, Kronos began eating the children. But Jupiter had saved these children and became king of the cosmos. And every 10 years, Jupiter and Saturn will conjunct and oppose each other, creating oppositions versus consolidations, having to accommodate changes, be responsible, make real solutions out of challenges. The Roman Saturn, the golden age, the abundance and peace, the winter solstice feasting, calling it Saturnalia, Normal social rules turned upside down, roles of the master and slave are reversed, moral restrictions unhinged, etiquette ignored, turning the world upside down. I read a book called The Kingdom That Turned the World Upside Down about the Catholic Church and how the symbolism was turned on its head, that there's a kingdom that exists here on earth that is heaven that we can realize for ourselves. But the stories representing the impermanence, the fear of time, the fear of the physical body, I associate it also with the involution and evolution processes, the cause and effects, the subjective and objective, that they are one. They come in and they come and they go and come in again. Stories repeat themselves, maybe. Saturn in Babylon as Nenutra. Saturn in these ancient times is also known for rainstorms, fertility, agriculture, war, wells, canals, floods, and plagues, the physical effects of nature. But Saturn in the 12th house represents a private inner life, how we serve ourselves, the feelings, knowledge, and activities that we are more comfortable handling alone, our inner privacy, for better or for worse, what we don't want others to know about ourselves. Shows the extent that we are at risk of our own undoing, how we act against our own interests, could indicate illnesses we face alone, can reveal our inclination to perform acts of kindness, selflessness, and sacrifice, how strong or weak those inclinations are. It can also represent the escapisms or the aloneness that we experience in hospitals, monasteries, spiritual growth, our own inner practices, or even imprisonments and dealing with our consequences of our own habits, or even working with residents or residents of those kind, working with residents of that kind in those places. A strong 12th house, Saturn in the 12th house, may be considered strong. It's strong in power as far as we've seen in the Catholic Church and its ability to set up camp and create religious beliefs. A strong 12th house can indicate connections to facilities and institutions, directly linked to personal experiences and religious practices, spiritual practices. Can also indicate very self-reliant. Again, maybe Saturn there, depending on your chart and the aspects in your chart, it may make you very self-dependent and self-reliant, but maybe difficult letting others into our world. So if you're a rising Pisces, you should be using an equal house system to give value to the degree. When people use a whole sign system, they're diminishing the significance and the value of the degree point. For example, my rising Leo at 2 degrees of strength and fire, losing 2 children in a fire Buick explosion. Aspects to Saturn and Pluto are not going to be easy. It shouldn't be taken lightly. And we should be prepared because knowledge is power. Saturn moving into Pisces would be Pisces rising or ascending 1st house, which is our first impression on people, our projected self-image, our bearing, our dress, our appearance, our self-confidence or lack of self-confidence, depending how strong this 1st house is and what aspects are to this house, whether we enjoy taking action, talking, acting, singing, dancing, judging, controlling, listening, or ignoring altogether. Our personality is the result of how we see ourselves, our self-assurance or our self-confidence or lack of. With a strong 1st house, you may see actors, entertainers, sports stars, salespeople. Successful presentation of the self depends on self-awareness to have conscious impact on the world around us. Saturn in the 1st house is serious, sensible, reliable, restricting, maybe creating more of that discipline that knows no bounds, I would put into focus to your daily practice that'll be in opposition of that rising sign of Saturn and the 6th house on the cusp of your 7th house. In even going to matters with business partners, interpersonal relationships, close partnerships, Saturn in opposition to that 7th house. In Vedic astrology, when we aspect the houses and houses to planets and planets to houses, and even more insight on the flows of this energy or the restriction of this energy, creating challenges. For Aries, it would be in your 12th house for an Aries rising, an Aries ascendant, who is a realist at heart, but may keep problems hidden or seek to avoid them altogether. That escapism of the 12th house. It's otherworldly. Sometimes we like to be in our fantasies, or we'll take care of it later. Taurus, in the 11th house, Saturn takes on too many responsibilities and may seek to avoid, or may seek to avoid them. Speaking of the 11th house and our contribution to other people, our willingness to give to other people. Saturn in Pisces, we may be responsible, feel we are responsible for the people around us, our communities, taking too much on or putting too much pressure on ourselves to solve those problems. Gemini in the 10th house for Gemini rising is serious, sensible, and controlling. Saturn is in the 10th house, representing our career or how people see us and our social status or the social status that we wish to climb to. We may be getting very serious about our practical work. Cancer in the 9th house, Saturn is a realist, but may be in exile or have problems overseas. Those restrictions, again, laws. 9th house representing that faraway learning or growing, traveling. That's Jupiterian, the hook of Jupiter that gets us, or the Jehovian spirit that we have to know and learn more about and connect to, that's ruled by Jupiter in this 9th house. This may come into focus for you at this time. Leo, Saturn in the 8th house of Pisces. Responsible, restrained, may block understanding by denying desires, having those, again, responsibility and restraints put on even sexual passions or even desires towards fortune and money. It might bring in blocks towards inheritances or fights through the court systems as well for inheritances and money from spouses or other past loved ones, possibly. And that represents fortunes of other people. It could be the lack of intimacy and sharing intimate feelings with other people. We may feel a little more restrained or nervous to share, or keep in mind how we're sharing ourselves. Virgo, Saturn in the 7th house is strong and reliable in relationships. Oh, Virgo. Saturn in the 7th house is strong and reliable, but relationships can be difficult. Saturn putting the pressure on those relationships, interpersonal relationships, could be business relationships in the 7th house, these most closest relationships to us. But persistence will bear fruit. Again, that 7th house, keeping in mind how we're treating other people, Saturn being the very physical world, our behavior, actions speak more than words. Libra in the 6th house, Saturn is best if control of work and health, not controlled by them. I know some Libras going through a hard time right now. Libras rule the kidneys. Libra sons may have fathers, stepfathers, parents that were alcoholics. Libras have 10th houses and first houses. You may find them in bartending, behind the bar, serving you drinks, working at the brewery, managing the brewery. They can also make great psychologists, Venerian ruled, and interpersonal relationships, understanding the harmonious balance between the left and right side of the brain, having discipline, where Saturn begins his exaltation there in Libra. So our daily routines are going to come into focus with that 6th house. Scorpio, Saturn in the 5th house has a more serious and responsible approach to pleasure. Doesn't seem that fun. I know a young boy that has Saturn in the 5th house who was not allowed to play sports in high school due to size or what have you, that they restricted his joy and fun on sports. So there's even a more responsible, dutiful, maybe not participating to have more structure, or maybe for health reasons, maybe for discipline towards higher learning, education. Children, the 5th house also represents children. Maybe there's a child that really needs your attention at this time. Maybe our habits are getting in check, what we like to do for fun, or even if it's just going shopping and bringing that down. That's quite Venerian. But Venus is feeling herself in Taurus for sure. Taurus likes to have nice things. It's our values, possessions that is ruled by Venus, what we work hard for. Sagittarius, Saturn in the 4th house, can create reliable foundations through hard rules and lessons. Saturn in the 4th, really putting our rules into the home, our standards. I think standards, what kind of standards we let into our house. Maybe there's no more mud on our shoes walking through the house. You got to take your shoes off when you come in the house. We're creating rules to create our comfortability and security at home. Or Miley Cyrus's new song, Muddy Shoes. Don't bring your muddy shoes. Don't bring all that drama, all that garbage in my house. It's not allowed here anymore. Capricorn in the 3rd house. Saturn considers ideas carefully, tends to hold back, putting a restriction on our ability to communicate. That's Gemini ruled 3rd house. Gemini loves to ask questions and be inquisitive and find answers. That mutable air sign. That's how Gemini learns. And also using the hands. Gemini likes to use hands and be great engineers. Even they can put things together and apart and take them apart. Everything. But perhaps what we're learning is making us think differently or be responsible about the things that we say and how people are going to accept them, putting restrictions on how we express ourselves. And Aquarius, Saturn moving into the 2nd house, is principled. Rewards come only through hard work. Saturn is all about discipline, the physical world, our physical, reaping what we sow within this lifetime. The 2nd house represented by Taurus, again, giving our values. What are we using our spiritual gifts for? How are we practically using those spiritual gifts and getting that value back? Saturn's going to make that very practical and put it into a real physical form, a physical process that you might have to diligently work for and work with. Keep to the plan, stay the course, and it will work. The plans work. Saturn will prove that to you. The discipline will work. So from March 7th to June 17th, all these sevens talk about work and interpersonal work and overcoming, get on the other side of the coin. Goes from retrograde from 7 degrees of Pisces to 0 degrees of Pisces till November. And then we'll move back forward. So Pisces is here. Saturn in Pisces is here to stay. Let me know in the comments how Saturn in Pisces is affecting you, what you expect from Saturn in Pisces, how Saturn in Capricorn has affected us so far, where that is in your chart, especially with an equal house system, not a whole sign system. But whatever you prefer, I'm curious. I want to have the conversation. I'm the only one. I'm talking to myself. Well, look at, I'm so used to talking to myself. I can talk to myself more than the green dot. Engage with me, constructively interfere down below. I am the Mad Medicine Woman with good reason. Peace, love, and light. Please check out my story, The Rapture, on my page.